Hey guys, my name is Nate and I'm the owner of Ultimate Ingenuity, where we specialize in antique truck parts and repairs. I'm making this video on how to swap in a V8 into a JTEC powered Ram. A lot of this information will kind of be essential for anybody working on a 96 to 03 39 52 59 engine. You're going to need several tools, torque wrench, you're going to need an engine hoist or a tree branch if you're a shade tree mechanic. There's a lot of stuff that you will need, but if you take your time, you can definitely do it. It's a bolt-in affair, essentially a bolt-in affair. You will need a variety of tools, but just take your time. If you need to borrow some from your friends, that's great. You don't have to do any welding. There's no fabrication involved. It's pretty much it's pretty straightforward, and I will cover everything that we ran into during this swap. For reference, we're using a 2000 model Dodge Dakota quad cab with a 5-speed manual NV 3500, and we're using a 1999 Dodge Durango 5.9 liter V8. If you're using a 99 engine, it's recommended that you have a 96 to 99 just due to how the engine bay is set up. If you're using a 2000 and up engine, we recommend to use that same year range of donor vehicle just due to how the engine bay is set up. You don't want to make any modifications. We do recommend having a complete donor vehicle, but it is not absolutely necessary. But we will jump into some things and enjoy the video. Ask questions if you have any. Post in the comments. We're going to put several links and a little bit of description, some pinouts, stuff like that, just to help you guys along the way. Enjoy. Alright guys, I added this in here because I just really thought it was good to note. You definitely want to have your replacement engine ready to rock and roll. I'd recommend doing some resealing, pretty much having it ready to go. You don't want to be battling leaks later on down the road. It's extremely difficult to get the oil pans off of these when they're in the engine. Just replace all the replacement stuff. Now this video is not about how to reseal your engine. This is how to get your engine in or swap in a V8 into a V6 platform. But anyway, just wanted to share that tidbit. Okay guys, basically this part here is I always like to take a video or at least several pictures of the beginning part. Basically how the truck's going to be looking, how the truck needs to go back together. I like to see how the lines are routed, cooling lines, heater lines, grounds, you name it. And so if you want to skip through this part, you can reference it later. But I thought it was essential to include this for you guys. There's nothing worse than getting a vehicle almost put back together and then not knowing how the lines route. Because there's literally hundreds of lines and wires and, if not thousands if you were to, break the loom down. So anyway, you can skip through this part if you want to. Just come back and reference it. It doesn't matter to me. I just thought it was very necessary to have.
Alright guys, currently pulling the Dakota down. Here is the current state. We're going from 3.9 Magnum to 5.9 Magnum. Let me turn this light off. All kinds of stuff has to come off, pretty much the whole front end. There is the 5.9 Magnum with the new 12-inch clutch and the new 5.9 externally balanced flywheel. Hood comes off, radiator sport bar. Obviously the intake components, electric fan, fan shroud, coolant, overflow, tanks, radiator hoses. And there's the new radiator and the upper shroud, obviously the hood there. Got several components from the Durango and also the wiring harness, which I will teach you guys how to depin the harness here shortly. We got parts laying around everywhere. But it's pretty much a bolt-in swap. The only thing you have to do is wire in the injector wires. So that'll be, I guess technically 16 wires that we have to wire in. But only 2 of those have to go into the PCM. It'll be the negative wires for the driver and I can throw up some schematics for that kind of stuff. But anyway, super excited to show you guys how to put this in. Like I said, we're not going to show everything, but if you have questions, make sure to comment below and let me know. Okay guys, currently pulling the Dakota down. Well, let me face towards it. Dakota here. Currently pulling it down. We're going with 5/9 swap. Let me switch the camera over and tell you what we've done. I can't record all of it on my phone, but we will try to just take note of the things that need to be taken note of. Let me see if I can switch this around. But we're making a little bit of progress. I don't want to have to recharge my AC, so we're moving this out of the way. As you can see, with all the blue tape, pretty much labeling everything. You know, you really want to know where everything goes. For example, your ground, excuse me, that's alternator. Ground, AC compressor. You get the idea. And you don't have to label your injector wires, nothing like that. Anyway, it is coming along. What do we have left? Exhaust manifold bolts, starter, some wiring, some vacuum hoses, bell housing bolts, and then we'll get to see and look on how destroyed that clutch, pressure plate, flywheel, all that fun stuff is. But anyway, thanks for checking in. It's Tuesday. Didn't make a lot of progress. Josh's car crapped out an alternator.
I wanted to take this moment to tell you guys it's really necessary to make what we call bolt diagrams. Basically, just take a piece of cardboard and draw out, for example, your bell housing or your motor mounts and where the bolt locations are. Sometimes I'll even put what the thread pitch or the head size is. That way I know when they're going back. Just take a Sharpie, draw it out, poke a hole where your bolts are, slip them in there, and keep track of how everything goes back together. Now the other thing is the Y-pipe bolts. I really, especially on a vehicle like this 2000 Dakota, this is 20 years old basically. There's no need in trying to wrench off the Y-pipe bolts. I highly recommend using a Sawzall and then just cutting them off flush with the Y-pipe and then popping them out. Another thing, I really like to take out the plastic fender liners on these trucks. It just allows you to access the bell housing bolts, the crank position sensor bolts, the Y-pipe bolts, things of that nature. Even the motor mounts are easier to get to whenever the fender liners are out. So just keep that in mind. You can see on the left side, you see the wheel right there? Same story. We have those fender liners out just to make it easier to work on. Another point a friend of mine wanted to add is that the lower starter bolt is actually a stud, and usually it does not come out. Now, in order to take your inspection plate off to get your engine out, you have to extract that stud. In case people aren't aware of this technique, all you have to do is take another nut of the same thread pitch, thread the first one on, thread the second one on, and then jam them together. And then you can loosen the inner nut and it'll extract that stud so you continue pulling your engine.
So we've got all that good stuff off. The motor's almost ready to come out. The only thing we lack are, not sure if you can see down in there, but there's 3 starter bolts. Excuse me, 3 motor mounting bolts on each side. We've already got the bell housing bolts. We went ahead and got a Sawzall and we cut the Y-pipe bolts. But other than that, it's coming out today. The motor is out. Check it out. Everything's good to go. Just gotta get a few things. Do some wiring for the injectors. Just swap a couple things over from the old motor to the new motor, and man, we're almost in business. There's a little 10.5-inch clutch versus the new 12-inch clutch. Pretty exciting.
Now, you don't have to have a donor vehicle, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture of the injector plugs, but you don't have to have a donor vehicle, but at very least, if you're going from V6 to V8, you have to have the injector harness plugs. And seriously, get as much of that injector harness plug off of the harness as you can get, because you're going to have to stretch this harness a little bit for the extra length of the V8 engine. So just go ahead, get as much as you can, and snip it off. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up splicing them into the into the factory harness. It's super easy and straightforward, and we'll have some video clips coming up.
You're gonna cut your 1, 3, 5, 7, your 2, 4, your 6, and your 8. And I opted to take the harness apart so I could use the factory connection. So on your 7th and your 8th injector wire harness, you're gonna leave the driver wire. So this is the ground wire. You're gonna leave the driver wire, you're gonna leave the driver wire connected so you can repin it to your 7 and 8 slots on your PCM. Disassembled this harness connector just to basically show you. There are actually 2 locks. One at that first click, and then the second, let's see if this thing will focus. Come on. There's 2 little tabs that hold that in place. And when you slide this on the inside next to those wires, it releases that first lock.
You can buy deep pinning tools online. They're fairly cheap, around $10, some as high as 50, but we made this one out of a brake caliper clip. It's kind of, harder stainless steel. And what it does is it releases those 2 locks that I showed you in the previous clip. And so you slide it over the wire, it releases the lock, and then you can slip that wire out. And it's very, very necessary that you keep the factory pin intact for the drivers, because this is what's going to control the injector pulse to your 7 and 8 cylinders. Now, I know the resolution on this picture is terrible. I'm just using it for a voiceover moment, but this next section is going to be about injector wires. Basically, all you have to do is cut your plugs off of your factory injector wires and literally splice in, just wire in your new injector wires for 1 through 6. There's going to be like a green and orange or a green and red constant, and there's going to be a colored wire, which is your driver wire. The color of your driver may differ, but no worries. As long as you've got your red and green in, you are on the right track. Now, on cylinders 7 and 8, tie your power wire, so your red and green wire, tie cylinder 7 power, so switch power, in to cylinder 5. It's the next one up on the driver's side. On cylinder 8, tie your switch power to cylinder 6. It'll be the next one up on the passenger side.
To the doctor at 1:30. Then go get the kids.
Now, the PCM plug you're working with is the one in the middle that's going to control your injectors. Now, that's what they call plug C2. Your fuel injector number 7 driver goes to cavity 2, and your fuel injector number 8 driver actually goes on cavity 13. And so these are the ones you're going to have to drill out from the backside, as we'll show you here in a moment, to repin your factory connections. Now here I am trying to get the camera to focus to show you that the harness plug is in fact numbered. So you can see number 2 and 13 there we're going to be working with. Now this is your first stage lock on your PCM plug. That's an unlocked position, but whenever you push those back in, you're locked. And that's very important if you want to add fuel injector driver wires. Now, on the back side of the harness plug, you do have to drill out cavity 2 and 13. Now, keep in mind, you probably will get some debris in there. The best way to get that debris out is with a paper clip. Your driver will not work with debris in there. Now, as you saw us drilling there, you want to be very careful. Just let the drill use its own weight in order to drill through the blank. Now, you only want to go through that first section of material. It's super important don't go any further to damage the inside of your powertrain control module plug. You would be sick if you messed up the locks, because you're going to have to figure out something to fix that later on. So, I just wanted to add in here that once you get your driver wire ready to install, so your cavity's drilled out, all you have to do is slip that fuel injector driver in the hole where you drilled it out, and it should grab that first lock. And then once it's in, you can engage your blue secondary lock. If you can pull this out by hand, you did not do something correctly. There's either debris within your cavity or you're not seated properly. That is very, very important to have these pieces seated all the way up, because your PCM must make good contact to control that driver wire ground. Now that your driver wires are added and everything's all wired up, you've got your injector wires in place, you can start slapping that baby together. Here we have Josh posing for the shot. I want to take this moment to make a few notes on some of the difficulties we had installing this engine. Now, first of all, we had to remove the battery box, actually just relocate it just a bit, a few bolts, and push it off to the side just for clearance on the power steering pumping bracket. The other thing is, if you haven't put or installed an engine on a manual transmission vehicle, you have to have the input shaft splines on the transmission perfect with the clutch disc. Now what we like to do is have two people on the front of the engine, or excuse me, putting the engine in, and one person spinning a tire on the rear of the truck, have the rear of the truck elevated, and slowly spin one of the tires to help engage the splines on the clutch disc. Also wanted to make a note, if you can see here next to the flywheel, is there is a dowel on each side of the bell housing, and that will help you so much when installing one of these Magnum engines. If you can align the engine bell housing dowels with the slot on the transmission, it's gonna just mate up so perfectly, and that's just one thing that you guys should know if you've never dealt with these before.
Okay guys, well, we have it all bolted in place. It's hanging on its own weight. That is a major step here. What did we have to do? Oh man, the hardest part here is getting the input shaft lined up with the pilot bearing and the clutch splines. And really, whenever you drop this in, you need a way to level the engine, whether you use chains and ratchet straps, something to get it tilted properly front to back. Things to note when you're dropping one of these in. The bell housing itself has alignment dowels, and that's really gonna get you close whenever you're dropping something like this in. Now, this is a fact. The 3.9 mounts will work. 3.9 motor mounts will work with the 5.9. They are direct bolt in, 3 bolts on each side. And what else? Oh yeah, the Y pipe for the 3.9, 318, 5.9, it's all the same. So the great thing is you can just bolt it right up. We've still got to massage the AC lines over a little bit, but we'll definitely make that bolt up. Got to run our grounds. We've got to bolt up, excuse me, we got to fasten up all of our connectors, and then obviously reconnect. Well, we did get the power steering lines connected today. We had a little bit of a freak out whenever we were going in. We ended up having the engine too low on the mounts, and we were thinking we were going to have to massage the oil pan or get another oil pan. But after some research, we were to get it all straightened up, nice and good. I think I already said we're going to have to change out the computer. We're going to use an automatic computer, which should run the truck. At some point, we're going to go with Flying Ryan Performance Custom Tune, which is supposed to be good for about 40 horsepower on this engine, which that'll definitely waken the truck up a little bit. Obviously, get coolant in it, get oil in it, oil filter. One thing, if you go and you're taking off the Y-pipe bolts, you might as well just cut them and use new bolts. You can use like a 3/8 by 16, 3 inches long. You're going to want to go back with stainless bolts as well. And use some anti-seize on the threads, because otherwise they're going to turn nasty. But yeah, it's coming all along, and we'll see if the fan shroud has any issues. We may just run no mechanical clutch fan on it. See if the electric fan will keep it cool enough. What else? Anyway, I guess that's it for now.
One interesting thing about these Magnum engines is that the distributor actually does not control the ignition timing. The ignition timing is controlled by the PCM. The distributor rotation, advance and retarding actually controls what they call the fuel injector sync, or the fuel injector pulse. Now, my favorite way to set your fuel injector pulse is you're gonna start by turning your engine over with a bar. You're gonna get it to top dead center on the compression stroke, and the easiest way is just to pull out the cylinder 1 plug and keep turning it, or have your friend turn it. Put your finger over the cylinder 1 plug, and if you get to TDC, and just before TDC it's blowing out air, you're at your top dead center compression stroke. If not, you're on your second top dead center and you're 180 out. Once you get to your top dead center compression stroke, just go a little bit past it. I think it's about 5 or 10 degrees, and you'll see this little mark here that says V8. That is the sweet spot for setting your fuel sync. So once you get to that V8, stop right there, and then you can drop your distributor in. So after you've got your distributor to the V8 mark on your harmonic balancer, you can drop your distributor in. I know the tab here on the distributor rotor has a little bit of corrosion, but no worries, it got cleaned up. Anyway, so the top of this frame is the passenger side of the vehicle, and as you can see, there's a little notch there below the rotor, and that is where you want to set. You want to make sure your rotor is facing that right there, and at cylinder number 1 when you're on that V8 mark. After this, you can install your hold down clamp and get it snug but not tight. You want to be able to rotate the distributor just a shade, and then I'll show you there's actually a wire coming off of the cam sensor on the harness side that we can back probe, and that's gonna tell us if our sync is close. So what you're looking at here is the harness side of the distributor cam sensor plug. Now that top wire is usually yellow, and it may be brown in some circumstances, but you're going to want to probe that side while you rotate your distributor. And what you're trying to do is get your sync set just perfectly. Now, what you'll do is you'll take a voltage meter, put the negative on the ground of the battery is fine, and then you'll probe that yellow wire with the positive of the voltage meter. And then it takes 2 people usually, so have somebody do that, and then the next person can be rotating the distributor. Now, what you're looking for is a very high jump in voltage. In our circumstance, it went from like 0.2 to 22 volts. In yours, it may be 0.2 to 5 volts. And honestly, I think my voltage meter was a little bit messed up. But what you're looking for is that jump in voltage. And whenever you do see that jump, right there between that jump, between 0.2 and the higher voltage, that is when your fuel sync is as close as you can get it. Now, this will get it to run, but we still recommend taking it to a dealer that has a DRB3 or someplace with a good snap-on code reader scanner that can actually do a fuel sync set. Now at this point, you should be able to pretty much button up the truck and at least fire it up, make sure all your accessories are in place. You can pretty much fire the truck up at this point and make sure that it's running good, that it's hitting on all cylinders, and that it's sounding good. After this, I mean, you're almost ready to rock and roll. Like, you are on the home stretch of finishing your V8 swap. The last real modification we had to make was we had to cut out a section of the V6 lower fan shroud. Obviously we can't be contacting any of our accessories on the engine. We notched this out for the crank pulley, and then we actually didn't even use our V6 fan housing extension, if that makes sense. Just the plastic piece that bolts to the fan shroud to make it a little bit longer. The V8 is long enough. It has no need for it. In fact, we probably have about 1 centimeter of clearance between the coolant tank and the power steering pulley itself. One other thing we had to modify, we did have to extend the one of the AC compressor harness plugs. It was no big deal. I think it was 2 wires that we had to basically just add an extension in. But I mean, we want to keep our AC on this. All the amenities is what we need to have. Just wanted to give a little note on that as well. And just a short recap on everything. You do have to use the V8 throttle cable. It's significantly longer. What else? Heater hoses have to be used from the V8. Let's see. We used our V6 coolant hoses actually. Now I would recommend shortening yours just a hair if you're going from V6 to V8. The fan shroud's going to be a little bit funny, but time will tell. We're going to try to run only electric fan on this one, see if it stays cool. We're in Middle Tennessee, so it doesn't get crazy hot, but I guess we will see. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and the next section will just be a compilation of pictures and images that you can reference in case you're looking to do this yourself. Also, feel free to check out our shop page at facebook.com/ultimateingenuity. That's ENGINUITY.